Some lies are so beautiful. You don't see the knife until it's already buried in your back. Serena Carter should have known that morning was too perfect. When you wake up in a penthouse overlooking the Atlanta skyline, sunlight pouring through floor-to-ceiling windows like liquid gold, your hand resting on the swell of your pregnant belly, while your CEO husband kisses your forehead before rushing off to change the world. That's when you should be afraid. Because in the South, we know something that the rest of the world forgets. The sweetest tea often hides the bitterest poison, and the most beautiful gardens grow over the deepest graves. It was a warm spring morning in Atlanta, city of dreams and second chances, where old Southern charm wrestles with modern ambition on every street corner. Serena lay in that king-size bed, feeling the gentle flutter of life inside her womb, a baby boy, they'd said, due in just 3 months. Marcus, her husband of 2 years, stood at the mirror adjusting his tie, all sharp lines and confidence, the kind of man who walked into boardrooms and made million-dollar decisions before lunch. Their downtown penthouse hummed with the soft rhythm of city life below, and through the open balcony doors, the scent of blooming camellias drifted up from the garden 7 stories down. For Serena, an interior designer who believed in creating beauty from nothing, who saw potential in empty rooms the way some people see it in empty canvases, life felt like her greatest design project yet. Perfect, complete, finished. She should have known better. They'd met at an art gallery opening 3 years ago. Marcus in a navy suit that cost more than most people's rent. Serena in a flowing floral dress that caught the light every time she moved. He'd approached her while she studied a painting of the Atlanta skyline at sunset, all purples and golds bleeding into each other. "It's beautiful," he'd said, "but not as beautiful as a woman looking at it." It was a terrible line, the kind that should have made her roll her eyes, but something in his voice, genuine, almost vulnerable, made her turn around. And when their eyes met, destiny didn't just knock. It kicked the door down. "Don't forget your checkup at noon," Marcus reminded her that morning, his voice carrying that mixture of pride and care that still made her heart skip. He adored his wife. Everyone could see it. She was the calm center of his whirlwind life, the soft place he landed when the tech world tried to eat him alive. Serena rubbed her growing belly, humming a lullaby to the unborn baby. And in that moment, Atlanta seemed to stand still. 2 hearts full of hope, ready to welcome new life into a world they'd built together, brick by careful brick. But here's what Serena didn't know. While she was humming lullabies in that golden morning light, her mother-in-law was already sharpening the knives. The call came at 10 a.m. Lillian's voice dripped through the phone like honey laced with arsenic. "Darling, I know this is last minute, but we're having a little Easter brunch at the estate. Just family. You and Marcus simply must come." It wasn't a request, not really. When Lillian Taylor spoke, people listened. She'd been raised on old Southern values and sharp business acumen, the kind of woman who could smile while destroying your life, who wore pearls like armor and wielded politeness like a weapon. Her Buckhead estate was the stuff of Atlanta legend. Sprawling gardens, columns that belonged on plantation, the kind of old money that whispered instead of shouted. Serena had tried. God knows she tried to win Lillian's approval. But there was always something in the older woman's eyes when she looked at her daughter-in-law. Something cold, calculating, measuring, as if Serena were a temporary fixture in Marcus's life, a phase he'd eventually outgrow. That evening, they arrived at the estate just as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. The place overflowed with laughter, with tulips in crystal vases, with a sizzling aroma of southern ham and sweet potato casserole, and all the dishes that made the South feel like home, even when it was slowly killing you. Lillian played the gracious hostess to perfection, gliding between guests in a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than Serena's car, touching arms and air-kissing cheeks, and making everyone feel like they were the most important person in the room. Serena's cheeks warmed at the outpouring of love from some of the aunts and cousins, genuine people who cooed over her belly and shared their own pregnancy stories, and made her feel, for just a moment, like she belonged. But Marcus looked tense, his jaw tight, his phone buzzing with emails that seemed to drain the color from his face with each notification. Under the table, Serena squeezed his hand, a silent promise that everything would be fine once the weekend began, once work released its grip on his throat. They ate lemon souffle on the veranda as the evening air turned purple. That's when Lillian made her move. "Dearest," she said softly, drawing Serena aside with a gentle hand on her elbow. "Come admire the jasmine with me. It's bloomed beautifully this year." The walled garden was a masterpiece. Climbing vines and hidden benches, and a kind of carefully cultivated wildness that only extreme wealth can buy. The jasmine filled the air with sweetness, so thick you could taste it. Lillian bent to touch a white bloom, and when she straightened, her eyes had gone hard as diamonds. "I've heard rumors about you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Serena's heart stuttered. What rumors? This was the moment. The knife sliding between the ribs. Lillian bent closer, and in hushed tones that somehow carried more weight than screaming ever could, she spun her web. "Serena had been unfaithful," she said, "with a rival colleague from Marcus's company, that handsome vice president with the easy smile. There were photos," Lillian claimed. "Evidence. Serena had manipulated company funds, skimming money for her own design business that was barely breaking even. And worst of all, most unforgivably, Serena had deliberately put Marcus's health at risk, exposing him to stress in situations that could trigger the heart condition he'd fought so hard to manage. Each accusation landed like a physical blow. Serena's blood froze, shame and fear mingling in her veins, even though every single word was a lie. "That's not true," Serena managed, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "None of that is true." But Lillian was prepared. She produced her evidence like a magician pulling rabbits from a hat. A photo of Serena at a company gala, standing close to the vice president, both of them laughing. In the picture, it looked intimate. Damning. Never mind that there had been 50 other people at that event, that the conversation had been about quarterly projections, that Marcus himself had been 10 feet away getting drinks. Then came the voicemail. Serena's voice, or something that sounded remarkably like it, breathy and confessional. "I can't stop thinking about you. What we have, it's special. Marcus can never know." Serena's mind reeled. The voice was wrong, the cadence off, clearly doctored. But it was close enough. Close enough to plant doubt. Close enough to burn down everything she'd built. "This is insane," Serena said, her voice rising. "Where did you even—" But Marcus was there. He'd heard it all from the doorway, his face ashen, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. And Serena saw something break in him, saw the trust they'd carefully constructed over 3 years shatter like glass hitting marble. "How could you?" The words came out strangled, barely human. "How could you betray me like this?" "Marcus, none of this is true." Serena reached for him, her pregnant belly making the movement awkward, desperate. He cut her off with a shout that made the party inside fall silent. Don't you dare lie to me." Lillian reappeared at his side, her arm sliding around her son's shoulders like a serpent coiling around its prey. "I'm protecting you," she said, her voice dripping with maternal concern. "That's all I've ever done. Protected my baby boy." And Serena understood then, with horrible clarity, that this had been planned. Every detail. Every piece of fabricated evidence. Lillian had orchestrated this destruction with the same care Serena used to design living rooms, selecting each element for maximum impact, maximum devastation. "I have loved you faithfully." Serena's voice cracked, tears streaming down her face. "These are lies. Marcus, please, you know me. You know I would never." But she could see it in his eyes. The doubt, the poison spreading. His mother's words echoed in his mind, mixing with every insecurity he'd ever had, every fear that he wasn't good enough, that someone would take advantage of his success. The sister-in-law's gossip she could hear filtering from inside, the way his business partner had looked at Serena last month at the company picnic. It all tangled together in his head, a knot pulled so tight it cut off the oxygen to his reason. Marcus looked torn, caught between the woman he'd promised to love and the woman who'd raised him. For just a moment, Serena thought she saw him waver, thought she saw him choosing her. Then his face hardened. He turned toward the car, and Serena followed, stumbling in her heels, her hand protectively cradling her swollen belly. "Marcus, wait. Please, just listen." He opened the driver's side door. She reached for the passenger side. and he slammed his door shut, the edge catching her shoulder, sending her stumbling backward. Her pregnant belly jostled with the impact, and she gasped more from shock than pain, though both flooded through her in equal measure. The baby kicked, whether in protest or fear, she couldn't tell. Marcus didn't look back. The engine roared to life, tires screeching against the pristine driveway, and he was gone. Just gone, leaving his pregnant wife on her knees on the asphalt, one hand on her belly, the other braced against the ground, surrounded by the whispers and stares of his family who'd witnessed everything but understood nothing. Serena felt the world tilt. Shock washed over her in waves, each one pulling her further from shore. The baby kicked again, harder this time, as if to say, "I'm still here. We're still here." She looked up and saw neighbors gathering on the driveway, their faces a mixture of confusion and outrage, and carefully concealed glee at the drama unfolding in front of them. Southern hospitality demanded they help. Southern gossip demanded they watch. Iris appeared from nowhere. Sweet Iris, her college friend who taught at the public school across town, and still came to these events because she believed in showing up for people. She'd seen everything from the kitchen window. "Serena, come on, let's go," Iris whispered, her arm around Serena's waist, helping her up with the kind of gentle strength that comes from teaching first graders and breaking up playground fights. Serena managed a brave smile at concerned guest, some cousin twice removed who probably couldn't wait to spread this story across Atlanta's social circles. Then her knees buckled, and she collapsed onto the curb, great heaving sobs finally breaking free from her chest. Her world had shattered. The man she loved believed the worst of her. The mother-in-law's lies had poisoned the only relationship that mattered. And the worst part, the absolute worst part, was that there was nothing she could do. No evidence to disprove a negative. No way to prove loyalty when the accusation was betrayal. How do you prove you didn't do something? How do you prove love to someone who's decided to believe you're incapable of it? Iris lifted her gently, guiding her toward her car. "We're going to my place," she said firmly. "You're not staying here. Not for another second." As they drove away from that perfect estate with its perfect gardens and its poisonous matriarch, Serena pressed her forehead against the cool window and watched the Buckhead mansions blur past. Atlanta's skyline rose in the distance, all glittering promise and broken dreams. She thought about the penthouse she'd woken up in that morning, how the sunlight had felt like a benediction, how Marcus had kissed her forehead, how she'd hummed lullabies to their unborn son and believed, truly believed, that they were building something that would last. Some lies are so beautiful. You don't see the knife until it's already buried in your back. And some mornings are so perfect. You don't realize you're saying goodbye to everything you've ever known. So here's what I want you to think about. When someone you love believes a lie about you, when they choose to see the worst instead of remembering the best, when they walk away without even giving you the chance to fight for the truth, what do? Do you crumble? Do you beg? Do you prove them right by giving up? Or do you do something they never expected? Serena woke up on Iris's couch to the smell of coffee and the taste of ashes in her mouth. That first night had been the longest of her life. She'd spent it in a spare room overlooking the Beltline, Atlanta's neon lights filtering through cheap blinds, painting shadows across walls that weren't hers in a life that suddenly didn't belong to her anymore. Her husband believed the worst of her. His mother's lies had poisoned their marriage like antifreeze in sweet tea, slow, deliberate, deadly. And the pain wasn't just emotional. It was physical, a vice grip around her heart that tightened every time she remembered the look in Marcus's eyes. That mixture of rage and betrayal and something worse, disappointment. But here's the thing about rock bottom. It's solid, and when you hit it hard enough, you could either sink through it or use it to push yourself back up. The baby kicked. A tiny flutter against her ribs, like a butterfly trapped in a cage. And Serena realized something that would change everything. She wasn't alone in this fight. There was a life growing inside her that didn't care about Lillian's lies or Marcus's betrayal, or the fact that their perfect world had imploded. This baby needed her to survive, to do more than survive, to thrive. In the silence of that borrowed room, Serena cried quietly, her tears blessing the indifferent city below. But even as she cried, her mind was working, planning, Because the girl who designed beautiful spaces from nothing, who'd turned empty rooms into homes, who'd built a career on seeing potential where others saw only walls, that girl was still in there somewhere, buried under the rubble of her shattered marriage. She just had to dig her out. The next morning came too fast and too slow. Serena woke to sharp pain in her abdomen, the kind that makes your breath catch and your world narrow to a single point of focus. Memories flooded back unbidden. The excitement she felt planning the nursery, picking out paint colors in soft blues and grays, humming lullabies while folding tiny onesies. Dreams of baby cribs and midnight feedings and Marcus holding their son for first time, tears in his eyes. All of it gone. But something shifted in that pain. Hurt and betrayal mingled with something harder, something that tasted like steel. Resolve. If Marcus and his mother had rejected her, if they'd thrown her away like garbage, then she'd do what she'd always done when faced with empty spaces. She'd build something new, something better, something that was entirely, completely, unshakably hers. Iris found her sitting at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of tea she hadn't touched, staring at nothing. "It's not your fault," Iris said, her voice steady and warm the way only teachers can manage, that practice calm that comes from dealing with chaos every single day. "We're here for you." We, such a small word, such enormous weight. Serena managed a weak smile, grateful for the warmth Iris offered. No longer in Marcus's penthouse prison, she felt powerless, but also, paradoxically, free. Free from a marriage built on fragile trust, from a mother-in-law who saw her as nothing more than an obstacle to remove, from the constant pressure to be perfect enough to deserve the life she'd been given. She'd lost everything, which meant she had nothing left to lose. And that's when things got dangerous. Weeks crawled by like wounded animals. Serena stayed at Iris's apartment, perched over morning coffee on the Beltline porch, watching bicycles roll past while she scrolled through messages Marcus had sent. They were a masterclass of manipulation. Furious accusations followed by desperate pleas for forgiveness. Threats mixed with promises. The emotional whiplash of a man who'd realized too late that he destroyed something precious but still couldn't admit he was wrong. She didn't answer. Not one. Every ignored message was an act of defiance, a tiny rebellion that made her feel almost human again. The baby's first kicks mingled with heartbreak. She'd press her hand to her belly and feel life moving beneath her palm, and the contrast would break her heart all over again. This should have been the happiest time of her life. She should have been glowing, celebrated, pampered. Instead, she was broke and alone and fighting just to keep her head above water. Her mother called from Philadelphia, her voice cracking with worry. "Baby, come home. Let me take care of you." But Serena couldn't run back to her childhood bedroom and admit defeat. Couldn't leave Atlanta, the city that had promised her everything and then stripped it all away. Because leaving felt like letting them win. Like admitting that Lillian had been right all along. That she'd never belonged in that world of penthouses and power. That she'd been playing dress-up in a life she hadn't earned. Marcus had taken their joint savings, every penny they built together, gone overnight. His lawyers were efficient. Lillian had made calls, pulled strings, ensured that Serena was cut off financially from every source that had once sustained her. It was a calculated move, designed to force her to come crawling back, to beg, to accept whatever scraps they decided to throw her way. But Serena was resourceful in ways Lillian hadn't anticipated. She found an old checkbook, a personal account she'd maintained from before the marriage. The balance made her want to cry, barely enough to cover a month of groceries. But it was something. It was hers. She stretched every dollar until it screamed, learning to live on ramen and determination, discovering that pride makes a surprisingly filling meal when you season it with rage. Then came the job. A small Atlanta startup, barely funded, operating out a converted warehouse near the West Side. They needed an interior designer to make their office space feel legitimate for investor meetings. The pay was a fraction of what Serena used to make. Almost insulting, really. But it was work. It was purpose. And more than that, it was proof that she still existed outside of Marcus's shadow, that her talent hadn't evaporated just because her marriage had. Each design board she created, every paint sample she selected, every piece of furniture she arranged, It all became an act of defiance, a reminder of her own worth beyond marriage, beyond Marcus, beyond the life she'd lost. The startup CEO, a fierce woman named Keisha who'd bootstrapped her company from nothing, saw something in Serena, a hunger, a determination, the kind of fire that only comes from having everything taken away and deciding to burn the world down rather than freeze to death. "You're going to be okay," Keisha told her one day, and it wasn't a comfort. It was a command. But the universe wasn't done testing her yet. Not even close. One evening, Maya appeared like a miracle wrapped in chaos. They'd known each other since art school, back when the world was full of possibilities, and neither of them knew what failure tasted like. Maya was a poet and a single mom, raising a daughter on spoken word performances and sheer force of will. She'd heard about Serena's situation through the Atlanta grapevine, because in this city, secrets spread faster than kazoo, and she wasn't having it. "You're coming with me," Maya announced, barging into Iris's apartment like she owned the place. "There's a gathering at the coffee house near Piedmont Park. Artists, mothers, survivors. Your people." Serena almost said no. She was exhausted, enormous, her ankles swollen and her back aching and her heart still bleeding from wounds that refused to scab over. But something in Maya's eyes, challenge, invitation, recognition, made her nod. The coffee house was alive with Atlanta's bohemian soul. Spoken word artists recited couplets about motherhood and survival, about broken hearts and broken systems, and breaking through to the other side. A young mother sat in the corner, cradling her baby girl, nursing calmly while a poet spoke about the revolutionary act of simply existing while black and female and tired. The air smelled like espresso and incense and possibility. Serena watched, her heart caught between ache and hope. These were her people. Not the country club set who'd watched her humiliation with barely concealed glee. Not the business associates who'd vanished the moment scandal touched her name. These were survivors, fighters, women who'd been counted out and had come back swinging. After the performance, Maya pulled Serena into a fierce hug. "You glow," she said softly, her hands touching Serena's visible bump with reverence. "You know that? You're literally creating life while your world falls apart. That's magic." Serena forced a small smile, but something cracked inside her chest. Not breaking, opening, like the first warm day after a brutal winter, when you realize you might actually survive after all. Then, as they were leaving, as Serena was walking toward her car under Atlanta's indifferent stars, it happened. The contraction hit like a freight train. 1 second she was fine. The next she was doubled over, gasping, her hands clutching her belly as pain radiated through her entire body. Too early. It was too early. The baby wasn't due for another month, and she wasn't ready, and everything was wrong. And Maya was already on the phone, her voice calm and commanding as she called for an ambulance. The streets of Atlanta blurred past as sirens wailed, lights bouncing off skyscrapers. The city that had watched her rise and fall now witnessing her desperate fight for survival. Serena closed her eyes and prayed to a God she wasn't sure was listening anymore. "Please, please let me get through this. Let my baby be okay. I can lose everything else, but not this, not this." But here's what nobody tells you about survival. It's not a single moment. It's 1,000 tiny moments strung together, each one a choice between giving up and taking one more breath. And in that ambulance, racing to the heart of Atlanta with her unborn child's life hanging in the balance, Serena made her choice. She was going to fight. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and new beginnings. Grady Memorial at dawn, with Iris by her side and Maya pacing in the waiting room, and Serena in a haze of pain so intense it transcended physical sensation and became something almost spiritual. She clutched Iris's hand, squeezing until she was sure she'd break bones, and whispered the same prayer over and over. "Please be healthy. Please be healthy. Please be healthy." Hours passed. Time became meaningless, measured only in contractions and heartbeats, and the encouraging lies doctors tell when they're not sure if everything will be okay, but need you to stay calm anyway. Serena thought about Marcus, about whether he even knew she was here, whether he'd care if he did. She thought about Lillian and her poison, about the life she'd lost, about all the ways this moment should have been different. Then the baby crowned, and thinking stopped entirely. The final push felt like dying and being reborn simultaneously. Serena screamed, not from pain, but from effort, from determination, from the raw animal need to bring this life into the world, no matter what it cost her. And then, suddenly, shockingly, it was over. The baby's cry split the air like a trumpet announcing victory. But here's the twist nobody expected. Least of all Serena, the baby was a girl. Not the son they'd been promised. Not the boy Marcus had wanted. Not the heir to his tech empire. A daughter. A tiny, perfect, fierce little girl with dark curls and wide eyes and lungs that could wake the dead. The nurse swaddled her and placed her in Serena's arms, and the world tilted on its axis. Lila Hope Carter, Serena whispered, the name coming to her fully formed, as if it had been waiting all along. Hope, because that's what this baby represented. Not the continuation of what was lost, but the promise of something entirely new. Marcus had lost his son, but Serena had gained a daughter, and in that moment, holding Lila against her chest, feeling that tiny heartbeat sync with her own, all the lies and heartbreak took a back seat to something bigger, something that felt almost like forgiveness, though not for Marcus or Lillian, for herself. Forgiveness for trusting wrong, for not seeing the knife before it struck, for believing that love was enough to protect her from people who saw her as nothing more than an obstacle to remove. Outside the hospital room, Iris and Maya stepped aside, giving Serena space to bask in this new life she created. Through the window, Atlanta stretched out in all its contradictory glory, cruel and kind, brutal and beautiful, a city that chewed people up and spit them out, but sometimes, just sometimes, gave them the tools to rebuild themselves into something stronger. That night, as Serena held sleeping Lila and watched the city lights twinkle from Midtown's glowing high-rises to the faint glow of the Beltline, something hardened inside her, not her heart, that was softer than ever, wide open and vulnerable in a way only new mothers understand. No, what hardened was her resolve. She'd been knocked down, humiliated, abandoned, cut off from everything she'd built, but she was still breathing, still standing, still capable of creating something beautiful from nothing. She'd done it with empty rooms for years. Now she'd do it with her empty life. The question wasn't whether she'd survive. She'd already done that. The question was, what would she build from the ashes? Over the next months, Serena discovered that she contained multitudes. Caring for a newborn while working full-time should have destroyed her. The sleepless nights, the constant worry, the bone-deep exhaustion that made her feel like a ghost haunting her own life. Some days, defeat seemed inevitable. But late at night, rocking Lila in the nursery she and Iris had cobbled together from second-hand furniture and sheer determination, Serena would sing lullabies and make promises. Promises of strength, of love, of a future that didn't include begging for scraps from people who'd thrown her away. And word began to spread. Marcus's circle wasn't as loyal as he'd thought. Friends contacted Serena quietly, guiltily, afraid that Marcus's version of events was only half the truth. They'd seen Lillian's manipulation before, her tendency to eliminate anyone she perceived as a threat to her control over her son. Slowly, like water eroding stone, details of Lillian's scheme began to surface. The doctored voicemail, the manipulated photos, the web of lies spun so carefully that even she'd almost forgotten what was real. Solomon, Marcus's closest business partner, discovered the discrepancies first. He was a forensic accountant by training, someone who noticed when numbers didn't add up, and Lillian's evidence had more holes than a screen door. He confronted her privately, his voice cold with disgust. You destroyed that woman's life over nothing, over your own insecurity, and you used me to do it. Lillian had smiled, unrepentant. I protected my son. From what? Happiness. But Serena stayed focused. Let them discover the truth on their own timeline. She had bigger things to build. Maya introduced her to the Beltline Workshop for Mothers, a spirited incubator bursting with women launching businesses, supporting each other, refusing to let single motherhood or poverty or society's expectations define their limits. There, surrounded by other survivors, Serena found something she'd been missing in Marcus's world. Genuine connection. These women didn't care about her designer clothes or her penthouse address. They cared about her ideas, her strength, her refusal to give up. And that's where Phoenix Nest Interiors was born. The name came to her fully formed, like Lila's name had. Phoenix, rising from the ashes. She envisioned a company that specialized in designing family homes that were safe, nurturing, and stylish. Not the cold, perfect showpieces she created for wealthy clients who valued appearance over comfort. Real homes, warm spaces where children could grow and mothers could rest and families could heal. Playrooms infused with nature. Support networks built into the design process. Advice tailored to new parents who were just trying to survive. It was personal. It was revolutionary. And it was hers. One rainy evening, with Atlanta's skyline glistening under streetlights, Serena pitched the idea to a panel of investors at a Beltline pop-up event. Lila slept in a car seat beside her, oblivious of the fact that their entire future hung on the next 10 minutes. Serena's hands shook as she clicked through her presentation, but her voice was steady. She described how a home, properly designed, could be a refuge for families like hers, for women who'd lost everything and were building back from nothing. Her eyes shone with grief and hope tangled together like vines. The investors sat silent. Serena's heart sank. Then the lead investor, a woman who'd built her own empire from a food truck and sheer audacity, started clapping. The others joined in. And just like that, Phoenix Nest had seed funding. Serena was stunned. The power had shifted from giving to receiving, from begging to choosing. She wasn't Marcus's wife anymore. She wasn't even Serena who'd lost everything. She was Serena who was building something new, something better, something that couldn't be taken away by lies or manipulation or other people's cruelty. But success brings visibility, and visibility brings confrontation. The work was brutal. Meeting contractors at dawn with Lila strapped to her chest. Client deadlines that meant choosing between sleep and eating. Sleepless nights spent drafting proposals and rocking a fussy baby, and wondering if she was insane to think she could pull this off. But each completed nursery, every satisfied client, all the families who told her she created a space where they finally felt safe, it made Serena feel whole again. She placed Lila's photo on her desk as inspiration, proof that impossible things happen every day. In 5 months, Phoenix Nest had designed 5 homes and earned a feature in Atlanta Woman magazine's New Entrepreneurs to Watch. The article was glowing, a profile of the mysterious designer who'd emerged from nowhere to revolutionize how Atlanta thought about family spaces. They'd tried to dig into her background, but Serena had been careful. No mention of Marcus, no hint of scandal, just a single mother building dreams with her bare hands. Marcus's PR team saw the article. They passed it to him during a board meeting, thinking he wanted to know his ex-wife was making waves. Marcus scrolled past without reading, focused on closing a deal that would make him millions. He didn't recognize the woman in the photo, head held high, daughter on her hip, eyes fierce with purpose. He didn't recognize her because she'd become someone he'd never known, herself. So here's what I need you to understand. When you lose everything, you discover what you're actually made of. And sometimes, just sometimes, you discover you're made of stronger stuff than anyone expected. But Serena's story wasn't over yet. Not even close. Because in Atlanta, nothing stays secret forever. And the truth was about to explode in ways no one saw coming. The real question is, when the people who destroyed you finally see what you become without them, what happens next? What happens when the person who tried to bury you has to watch you bloom? Almost a year to the day from the betrayal, fate decided it was time for a reckoning. Atlanta has a way of making people face their demons. The city's too small for old money and new success to avoid each other forever, too intertwined for past and present to stay neatly separated. And on a crisp fall morning, with leaves turning gold over Peachtree Street, the collision course was set. A business conference was being held in downtown Atlanta's Peachtree Center, one of those massive events where the city's elite gathered to network and posture and pretend their money made them better than everyone else. Lillian had persuaded Marcus to bring Phoenix Tech to the showcase, desperate to raise capital after whispers had started circulating about the company's fraying edges. His miracle billion-dollar startup wasn't quite so miraculous anymore. Investors were asking uncomfortable questions. Board members were getting nervous, and Lillian, ever the manipulator, thought a flashy presentation might distract from the cracks in the foundation. But here's the twist. Phoenix Nest Interiors had been invited too. The conference organizers had seen Serena's work, read the glowing profiles, heard the buzz about this mysterious single mother who was revolutionizing family design. They wanted her to present as an innovative startup helping Atlanta families. They had no idea they were lighting a match in a room full of gasoline. Backstage, Serena was getting ready to speak. She was calm, composed, dressed in a simple navy suit that cost a fraction of what she used to spend on clothes, but somehow made her look more powerful than she ever had in designer labels. Maya and Iris flitted around her like guardian angels, proud and protective, and ready to throw hands if anyone so much as looked at her wrong. Serena spotted Marcus pacing by the doorway, his jaw clenched, his shoulders tight with stress. He looked smaller than she remembered, or maybe she'd just grown taller. They hadn't spoken since that night, hadn't acknowledged each other's existence. She'd ignored his messages until they stopped coming, built her life in the spaces he'd left empty, created something he couldn't touch or tarnish or take away. And now here they were, about to share a stage in front of hundreds. Meanwhile, Lillian lurked at the edge of the presentation hall, her expensive pearls clicking against each other like worry beads. She'd aged in the past year. New lines around her mouth, gray threading through her carefully colored hair. Seeing Serena's name on the program had sent her into a quiet panic. The daughter-in-law she destroyed was supposed to have disappeared, crawled away in shame, maybe moved back to Philadelphia with her tail between her legs. She wasn't supposed to have thrived. But when has anything ever gone according to Lillian's plans when strong women are involved? Serena stepped onto the stage, and the lights hit her like a benediction. The audience, hundreds of journalists, entrepreneurs, famous Atlanta philanthropists, investors with more money than God, fell silent. She looked out at the sea of faces and felt something shift inside her. Not nervousness, not fear, certainty. She spoke about Phoenix Nest Interiors with quiet passion, weaving in her personal story in threads, so subtle most people missed the depth of what she was really saying. The need for a nurturing home after life storms. The fight to hold on to hope when everything tells you to give up. The revolutionary act of creating beauty from ashes. Her voice was strong, carrying the grace of a woman who'd found purpose in the wreckage of her old life. She talked about the families she'd helped, single mothers, divorced fathers, couples rebuilding after tragedy. How she designed a nursery for a woman who'd lost everything in a house fire, a playroom for a family navigating the father's cancer diagnosis, a home office for a mother who'd escaped domestic violence and was starting her own business. Each project was personal. Each design was an act of defiance against a world that tells broken people to stay broken. The cameras flashed. The applause started slow and built like thunder, rolling through the auditorium until the walls shook with it. Serena felt it in her bones. She found not just a business, but a calling, a mission, a way to transform her own pain into something that could heal others. And in the audience, Marcus watched his wife, his ex-wife, with something that looked like awe mixed with grief. This was the woman he'd abandoned on his mother's driveway. The woman he believed capable of betrayal because his mother's word had carried more weight than 3 years of devotion. And she'd become someone he barely recognized. Independent, powerful, complete without him. Reporters swarmed Serena after presentation, throwing questions like confetti. How did she get started? What inspired her designs? Was she single? Open to investors? Planning to expand? She answered each one with the confidence of someone who'd earned every syllable, who'd paid for success in tears and sleepless nights and moments of despair so deep they'd felt like drowning. Serena's friends shielded her from the worst of the crowd, creating a protective barrier. She didn't seek confrontation, didn't need it. Her success was confrontation enough. But backstage, as Serena packed up materials, as Maya and Iris celebrated with champagne someone had sent over, Marcus finally approached. His footsteps were hesitant, almost apologetic, a far cry from the confident CEO who'd once commanded every room he entered. Serena, he began quietly, and his voice had lost all its earlier arrogance, all its certainty. I saw your speech. You're incredible, Serena looked at him with steady eyes. He seemed shorter than her last memory of him, worn thin by stress and regret, and the slowly dawning realization of everything he'd lost. "Marcus," she said softly, her tone neither warm nor cold, just factual. "It's been a long road." He opened his mouth, words tumbling out in a rush. "Lillian, you have to know," she lied. "None of it was true. I was a fool. I should have believed you. I should have." But Serena held up a hand, stopping him mid-confession. And here's what she realized in that moment. He wasn't really apologizing, not the way apologies are supposed to work. He was lamenting his own loss, mourning the life he could have had, feeling sorry for himself. There was regret in his eyes, sure, but not the kind that comes from understanding the harm you've caused. The kind that comes from realizing you bet on the wrong horse. "I'm glad you know the truth," Serena said, her voice gentle but firm as steel wrapped in silk. Lila cooed in her arms, sensing the attention, her tiny fingers wrapping around Serena's thumb. "But knowing it doesn't change what happened, doesn't undo the damage." Marcus's eyes fixed on Lila's tiny face, taking the dark curls, the wide eyes, the features that were pure Serena. "You have a beautiful daughter," he said, and there was something broken in his voice. "I do," Serena agreed, her tone making it clear. She had a daughter. Not we. Not ours. I. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, running a hand through his hair in a gesture so familiar it made Serena's heart twinge, not with longing, but with the ghost of who she used to be. "You're moving on," he said quietly, and it wasn't a question. It was a man witnessing the final death of a relationship he'd killed with his own hands. Serena started to respond, to offer some platitude that might ease the moment's awkwardness, but that's when Lillian burst through the door like a hurricane in pearls. Time slowed to a crawl. Everyone in the room turned to watch as the elegant matriarch, the woman who'd orchestrated Serena's destruction with such careful precision, pointed an accusing finger that shook with rage. "You ruined my son's life," Lillian spat, her voice brittle and sharp as breaking glass. "You took him away from me." The irony was almost poetic. Serena's spine straightened, and something fierce flashed in her eyes. "You took away our home and drove me out," she shot back, her voice soft but carrying to every corner of the room. "You destroyed a marriage with lies because you couldn't stand to see your son happy with someone you didn't control." The air thickened with tension. Conference staff members froze, their faces bewildered, caught between professional obligation and the magnetic pull of high-stakes drama. This was the stuff of Atlanta legend. Old money versus new success, mother-in-law versus daughter-in-law, lies versus truth, all playing out in public like a Greek tragedy performed in business casual. Before Lillian could unleash another accusation, before the moment could spiral further into chaos, Diane Shin stepped forward. She was one of Serena's mentors from the Beltline workshop, a powerful businesswoman who'd built her empire from a food cart and sheer determination, who'd faced down worse than Lillian's brand of manipulation and come out victorious. She recognized Lillian from news articles about Phoenix Tech, knew the family's reputation, understood exactly what was happening. Diane raised her voice so everyone could hear, clear and commanding. "Ms. Taylor, these are not the halls for personal vendettas. We have heard about your manipulation from several sources. Your attempt to sabotage an honest woman's life, a pregnant woman, no less, is unconscionable." Gasps rippled through the crowd like stones thrown into still water. Lillian flinched as if she'd been slapped. Marcus swallowed hard, his face draining of color. And suddenly, crystallized in that single moment, the truth became undeniable. Everyone in that room, the investors, the journalists, the entrepreneurs who'd been following both stories, understood exactly what had happened. The powerful matriarch had tried to destroy her daughter-in-law out of jealousy and control, had fabricated evidence, had poisoned her own son's marriage, had driven out a pregnant woman, and left her to fend for herself. And that woman had risen anyway. Marcus looked at the three of them, his ex-wife standing tall with their daughter in her arms, his mother exposed and diminished, himself caught in the middle of a disaster he'd helped create, and his face crumpled with the weight of understanding. Every lost opportunity to be with Serena and Lila, every moment he'd missed of his daughter's first year, Every night he'd spent alone in that penthouse, wondering why success tasted like ashes. All of it, every bit of pain and regret and loneliness, had been because he'd chosen to believe his mother's lies over his wife's truth. Serena gently rocked Lila, looking at each of them in turn. The ambitious EO reduced to a shell of himself. The remorseful son who'd realized too late what he'd destroyed. The manipulative mother who'd overplayed her hand and lost everything. Lillian, usually so in control, could only glare. But there was something else in her eyes now, something that looked almost like fear. No one stood with her. Not Marcus. Not the society friends who'd watched her orchestrate Serena's humiliation. Not the business associates who'd profited from her connections. She looked almost foolish standing there, a frail old woman whose weapons had been taken away, exposed as a villain in a story where she'd always seen herself as a hero. Atlanta's elite had witnessed her downfall, and the city would not forget. But Serena wasn't finished surprising people. Not even close. The confrontation became Atlanta legend within days. Headlines blazed across local news and business publications. Phoenix Nest founder confronts powerful Atlanta matriarch. Tech CEO and mother forced to face truth about family destruction. Single mother's triumph over manipulation inspires Atlanta women. The story had everything: wealth, betrayal, redemption. A baby and justice served cold in a conference hall. But what happened next shocked everyone. Marcus announced that Phoenix Tech would invest in Phoenix Nest Interiors as a new subsidiary, a public reconciliation. He called it a way to support the mother of his child and merge their visions of tech and design for family-focused smart homes. Investors loved it. The press ate it up. Everyone assumed Serena had begged for the partnership, that she was taking Marcus back, that the fairy tale was getting its happy ending after all. They couldn't have been more wrong. In a televised interview arranged by Diane Chun, who become both mentor and fierce protector, Serena stood tall in a cream blazer with Lila on her hip and made an announcement that sent shockwaves through Atlanta's business community. Phoenix Nest Interiors will remain completely independent. When the interviewer asked if she planned to reunite with Marcus, Serena answered with devastating grace. My husband and I have both moved on in our own ways. Right now, I'm focused on building a future for my daughter that's rooted in trust, integrity, and love. I'm building something that can't be destroyed by lies or taken away by manipulation. Something that's entirely mine. The words hit like a falling building. Marcus had wanted to absorb her success into his empire, to make her achievement part of his narrative. Serena's refusal slammed that door so hard the echo could be heard across 3 counties. Instead, Phoenix Nest expanded independently, hiring Atlanta's best designers and engineers, funded by new investors who'd been impressed not just by Serena's vision, but by her backbone. Within days, PhoenixNestInterior.com was trending on social media, with mothers across the country praising the CEO who refused to be silenced, who turned betrayal into triumph, who proved that you don't need the people who threw you away. And then came the final shock, the moment that cemented Serena's legend in Atlanta's history. Phoenix Nest's grand opening of their flagship showroom was held in Buckhead, Lillian's territory. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Serena unveiled a state-of-the-art model home filled with everything she'd learned from her journey. Nurseries with soft natural light and eco-friendly furniture, playrooms designed for both chaos and calm, voice-activated systems that sang lullabies and adjusted lighting for midnight feedings, spaces that felt safe and nurturing and real. Not the cold perfection of magazine spreads, but the warm functionality of actual family life. As she cut the ribbon, with Lila babbling happily on her hip, Serena gave a speech that would be quoted for years. Every setback can be a new beginning. Every betrayal can be a teacher. Every moment you think you're destroyed is actually the moment you discover what you're truly made of. I built this company from ashes and tears and the fierce love of a mother who refused to let her daughter grow up believing that being knocked down means staying down. The crowd erupted in applause. And in that crowd, in carefully separated sections like opposing armies, sat the players in this drama. Marcus watching from a distance, his expression unreadable but his posture defeated. Lillian in the front row, shoulders slumped, the fight finally drained out of her. And Serena's people, Maya and Iris and Diane, and all the mothers from the Beltline workshop, cheering like their lives depended on it. Marcus understood then, watching his ex-wife shine brighter than she ever had when she was his, that Serena's story was no longer about them. It never had been, really. It had always been about her, about a woman discovering that she contained multitudes, that she was capable of more than she'd ever imagined, that the person she'd been in that penthouse was just a shadow of who she could become. Months rolled forward like a river flowing to the sea. Summer descended on Atlanta, heavy with warmth and possibility. Serena had transformed from inspiration to institution, mentoring at the Beltline Workshop, speaking at Atlanta University about women in business, building an empire that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with purpose. Each time she passed the glass front office of Phoenix Tech, she no longer flinched. That life belonged to someone else, someone smaller, someone who believed she needed a man's approval to be whole. One early morning, Serena and Lila, now a toddler with her mother's determination and a laugh that could light up entire rooms, strolled through Piedmont Park. Lila giggled at ducks on the lake, chasing them with chubby legs and absolute conviction that she could catch them if she just tried hard enough. Serena felt peace settle over her like morning dew. This was so far from that first night, crying under Atlanta's neon signs, wondering if she'd survive until morning. Marcus appeared on the same path, walking from the opposite direction. He'd taken to morning walks, his therapist said, to clear his head and process his regrets. When he spotted Serena, he approached slowly, cautiously, like someone approaching a wild animal they'd once wounded. Serena turned, surprise and caution flickering across her face, but no fear. She'd moved past fear. "For everything," Marcus said quietly, his voice raw with emotion. "I'm so sorry. You were right all along. About everything." Serena waited, tears bright in her eyes but steady, controlled. She had answers to years of hurt standing right in front of her. But looking at Marcus, she saw only a man broken by his own mistakes, someone who'd lost something precious because he'd valued the wrong things. She shook her head gently, not in anger but in finality. "It's over," she said softly. "Not cruel, just true." Marcus nodded, understanding that forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation, that accepting an apology doesn't mean forgetting what was done. Some bridges, once burned, shouldn't be rebuilt. As Serena and Lila continued their walk, Lila pointed at a red balloon floating above the trees, her eyes wide with wonder. Serena knelt down, bringing herself eye level with her daughter. "Reach for it, baby," she whispered. "Always reach for the things that seem impossible." A curious sparkle lit in Lila's eyes, the same determination Serena saw in the mirror every morning, the same fire that had carried them both through the darkest nights. Serena smiled, her heart soaring with pride. She had reached for her own red balloon with every sunrise that felt impossible, every client meeting she attended exhausted, every moment she chose to build instead of break. Atlanta's skyline stretched out before them, from Midtown to the Beltline to Buckhead and beyond, glinting under the morning sun like a promise. This city had tried to destroy her. Instead, it had forged her into something stronger. The final chapter, at least for now, was written the day Phoenix Nest Interiors won the coveted Golden Key Award for Design Innovation in Atlanta. At the ceremony in downtown's Grand Civic Coliseum, Serena stood alongside Maya and Iris, her chosen family, the women who'd carried her when she couldn't walk. Journalists asked if she'd ever settle down again, if she considered dating, if there was room in her life for romance after everything she'd been through. Serena's answer was pure fire. "I'll let life unfold its chapters. Right now, I'm exactly where I need to be, building dreams, raising my daughter, proving that the best revenge is becoming so successful that your enemies can only watch in silence." From the back of the auditorium, Lillian watched. And this time, the sting of Serena's success brought something unexpected, grudging respect. She'd underestimated her daughter-in-law, had seen her as nothing more than an obstacle to remove. She'd never imagined that the quiet interior designer with the gentle spirit would contain such steel, such determination, such absolute refusal to be destroyed. As the award was announced, as Serena and her team lifted the trophy together, while cameras flashed and the audience rose in a standing ovation, Atlanta itself seemed to hold its breath in recognition. This was the city's story, too, the story of second chances and Southern resilience, of women who've been counted out coming back to claim their crowns. That night, Atlanta glimmered with infinite possibility. Serena Carter had risen, a true phoenix from the ashes, proving that even in the darkest betrayals, even in the cruelest manipulations, even when the people who should love you most choose to destroy you instead, a brighter dawn is always waiting for those brave enough to survive until morning. So here's my question for you. What would you do if you lost everything tomorrow? Would you crumble, or would you build something new from ruins? Would you let betrayal define you, or would you let it refine you? Drop your answer in the comment below, because Serena's story isn't just hers. It's every single person who's ever been knocked down and had to decide whether to stay down or rise up. And I want to know, are you a phoenix too? Hit that like button if the story moved you. Subscribe if you want more American stories of survival and triumph. And share this with someone who needs to hear that their current chapter isn't their final one. Because the truth is, your story isn't over until you decide it is. And sometimes, the best chapters are the ones you write after everyone else said the end.